Woo! Heart-centered marketing on a Tuesday night, September 26th. I was going to say 23rd. I don't know why 3 is in my head, but 26th, um, where we are in 2023. Welcome to another show of Heart-centered marketing. I'm so glad that you were here. We are so glad that you were here. And what I mean by we, I'm talking about my special guest today, Lorna Scott, in the house. How are you?
I'm very well. Hi, everyone.
Good to see you. Glad you're here again for another epic show. I know that this one is a hot topic for a lot of people and for us because we talk a lot about fear. And welcome everyone to the show. If you're here, by the way, hashtag live or hashtag replay, let us know when you're watching, and it would help us out. And if you want to interject into the show, give us some feedback, comments, all that kind of stuff. We welcome it. This is not just a conversation between Lorna and I. It's a conversation for the community. So let us know what you think. Give us some insight. Let us know about what you think about today's topic, which is we're talking about fear, right? Talking about choosing fear. You and I, so what does that mean? I'll let you kind of dig into it a little bit because you and I had a discussion before, a couple of discussions, and it was something that I believe I said to you, and I said that we never really get away from fear. It's like you just have to choose the fear. So I'll let you kind of just bounce off of that, and then we'll see where this goes. Hey, Amber, good to see you.
Yeah. We had a kind of a really great conversation last week on fear and about how it holds people back. Where, especially in our world, I think just about in any sales, anything that deals with sales, there's all fear for most people. And there's so many, at least, I know for me, there's been lots of things to learn in this world and in the online piece. And I've had to deal with a whole lot of fear, and some of it I've chosen a fear.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's the thing. I've always chosen a fear.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I've let the fear hold me back, and sometimes it's pushed me forward.
Mm-hmm.
But it just seems like many conversations happen that you can just distill down to some kind of a fear that is underlying whatever distress is going on, whatever is not working well in someone's life, how they want to be different. And what's really interesting eh, that kind of came out of that conversation is that sometimes we're comfortable in a fear.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a comfortable place. So even though it kind of sucks and we know it's holding us back, it's just more comfortable than choosing the other fear.
Yeah, because we're familiar with it.
Yeah.
Wouldn't
I
Wouldn't
mean,
you agree?
yeah, I do. We're familiar with it. It still was, uh, I wouldn't say it was like a huge, epiphany, like my life is like forever changed. And because I think I knew it before, I hadn't really realized or recognized how many how that happens so often for other people, and that if they could see of what was holding them back and uh, some of the actions that they take that are really rooted in fear, that's I think they would see it a whole different way, and that they would start to embrace the fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'm giving it back to you.
Okay. I'm gonna bounce off what
Hey,
you
you're
said
it.
there
Yeah, you
because
can bounce.
you know, let me try to explain what I mean by choosing the fear because I know and I believe for sure, but I also know for a fact because I've lived in fear or with fear all my life and have been. It's kind of a superpower almost that I can step into it and not really and not really care. It's not that I'm never afraid of something, but I choose the unknown fear rather than the fear that I'm already in. So, for this, a simple example is, I'm not making money. I can't pay my bills or whatever. Like, what's going to happen next month if I can't pay my bills or I can't eat or whatever? Like, you're afraid, right? There's no doubt about it. But that's what I mean. But you're comfortable with that feeling. You already know how it feels. The other new one is like, well, if I quit my job or I start a business or I do whatever, you don't know what that fear feels like. So that's what holds us back, because you're sitting in the fear that you already are comfortable with. And I use comfortable in a very, very light way, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean is choosing the fear. Well, okay, which one do you want to live with? And I think that's where the conversation really erupted for us is, and even for me, because um, I face the unknown fears, and then once I'm comfortable with that new fear that I've gotten into, then I know I need to move again. Because I often talk about I don't have fear, and that's not really the truth. I think the truth is the fact that I'm comfortable with this fear that I'm in now, and I'll face the next fear. That's what I mean by I'm okay with stepping into the unknown fear. So, what do you think about that? And Christopher says um, that it's harder to face. It's harder to face the fire of faith. Yes, 100%.
Oh, yeah. I did totally agree with that, Christopher. And it feels like faith. And yeah, when I think about even being in that more familiar fear, we're still relying on faith. We just don't see it. And what
So,
what
okay, let
strikes
me
me,
let me ask you that. So that's a really interesting thought. Can you elaborate on that so I can get more context of what you mean by that?
uh, because I mean, for example, given that example of um, the fear of quitting my job versus the fear, which might be, I would say that would maybe be the more comfortable fear, like it's reliable income, it's, it gives some security. We were always told, I grew up in a home where it was always told you can go to school, you get a good job, you provide for your family, and any kind of things that happen. But you want to quit it because you've got this passion for something else, something bigger, and you want to do that, but you don't maybe have the path yet, or even you've seen some of the path, but you don't know where it's going to go, and you don't know how it's going to be. Uh, so if you're in that comfortable fear of, the fear that I'm going to go and walk into my boss and quit my job, and then I'm going to go home, and I'm going to, if you've got family at home, or chances are you're going to tell someone else after you quit the job, is what that response and what being afraid of what other people are going to think, or what are they going to do, and can you really make it. Is that you might stay in that fear a long time, but it's still faith, because you still have the job, you still want to quit, so you're still relying on some kind of faith that keeps you in that moment,
Mm.
um, and faith that if you stay there, it's all going to work out.
Yeah, see,
I don't
that's
know
where
if
I
that's a
was.
I don't know if that's a conscious thought, because it just popped into my head when we were talking. Like I
Right.
don't know it, but I think there's still faith of something. So
Yeah.
maybe this is actually about choosing your fear and faith.
No, that's where I was. That's where my mind was going with this is the fact of if you're choosing the current fear, let's call it that, the present
Yeah.
fear, then
Yeah.
the faith part of it for me would be, well, I'm already comfortable with this, and even if you're not consciously thinking that I'm comfortable with this here, you're thinking it'll get better. It'll get better sooner or later. Like that's what the belief is. So I that's what I totally agree with you. So I'm glad you finished off the the thought with that, because
Yeah.
that's where my mind goes with it.
Well, and it might even be a little bit of the faith that if I just want it bad enough, something else is going to happen to make it happen. I don't need to take the step to
Mm,
quit my
yeah.
job.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Faith that something else is going to intervene, so
Yeah.
that it makes the decision for you. And I mean, the scary part about that is that sometimes that decision is made for you, and
Yeah.
it's still a scary place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and that brings up different fears.
Yeah.
Um,
Amber says, once we recognize the fear, how do we move through it and get stuff done? I'm glad you asked that question. uh, the simple answer, and I know this sounds really simple because I'm gonna I'm just going to refer back to the book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, which is a fantastic book. I recommend everybody grab that. And that's the answer. It's do it anyway. And there's no real magic to it. And so the way that I deal with it, because like I said, I've been dealing with all these things my entire life, ever since I wanted to start my own business when I was a teenager. Fear of the unknown, and I was like, whatever happens, happens. Um, I was, I always looked at, am I willing to stay where I am now in the situation that I am now, and can it really be worse than where I am? And usually it's not. So you could look at, let's say that I'll just use the example of a business. Maybe I'll come up with another idea for an analogy. But let's say that I don't have a business, and I'm like, well, if I start a business, what if I start a business and it doesn't work? What if I start a business and it goes bankrupt? Well, you don't have a business now, right? I don't have a business. So I could start the business, it could do it, and it can go bankrupt. Yes, that would suck, but I'm back in the same position as I was before. Does that make sense? It's maybe it doesn't make sense, but that's the way my brain, my entrepreneur brain thinks. It's like I'm not there anyway. So there's a better chance of me becoming more successful or being able to have my own income and my own life, my own freedom and all this if I do this thing. And the worst that's going to happen is it's going to fail and crash and everything else, and I'll be back to exactly the same place as I was before. Any thoughts on that, Lorna?
Yeah. And maybe I might have a suggestion on how to answer that question. Really, the question about how do you move through them, I think, is dependent on exactly what the fear is. There's different things that you can do. And some people may have heard about, the acronym of fear is fantasized experiences appearing real. So fear is always, we create the fear. And we created the fear, based on our history. And I'm not a science person, so I don't know if it was biology or physiology or whatever it was, but whatever it is that, taught us that if we see a saber-toothed tiger, then we have fear, that still exists in us. So we create that fear, and we can uncreate the fear. Uh, I guess before I get into that, I agree with everything you said, Joey. Like it's going through and exactly what you say in our conversation last week, talking about choosing the fear, because
Yeah.
there's a fear anyway, and it's about choice. So one of the ways that you can deal with with fear is to change the statement. So if you have, the statement of whatever it is you're afraid of, and you say, I'm afraid of whatever the blank is. But what you put after that is, and I scare myself by imagining that, and then whatever the fear is telling you, so that you can get a different message that you are you are creating that fear in your mind. And if this isn't to say that you're imagining and it's not real, the fear is real. Like that feeling is real, and it's
Yes, for
very
sure.
powerful.
Yeah.
And if you
Yep.
can release that from your mind, that it's holding you, where you get a chance to release it, that's one way that you can release the fear. And then there's other things that you can do depending on what it is. Some people are afraid to ask. That's a big one. Like they're afraid to ask for what they want. That's a big fear. And so I'll leave that for later. If anybody has that fear, you can comment and I'll add to it. I'd rather see the fears in the comments and then be able to respond to the group
Mm-hmm.
today. So um, another way that you can deal with the fear is scale down the risk, which I think that many people do when they're leaving a job and going into entrepreneurship, is that they do some savings. They maybe go from full-time to part-time. So that's another way that you can reduce some of the fear if that's in that kind of scenario.
Yeah. It's funny. I should say it's funny. It's different the way that when I approach these things and when I'm coming, because I can't come from it from an angle of like a person who's had a job and they're moving into entrepreneurship and all these things, because I've always been an entrepreneur, and it's not that my thinking is better than anybody else's. It's probably worse. It's probably crazy the way that I think about moving into fears and stuff. And and even before I learned about manifestation, or I learned about positive thinking and all these other things, it's still I still look at whether it's right or wrong. What's the worst that's going to happen if I do this? Like, that's where my mind goes first. And I don't
Mhm.
stay there. I don't stay in negativity, but I always look at what's the worst that's going to happen, and can I handle that? And that's where
Yeah.
I begin the conversation in my mind. And then if I can handle that worst situation, and because it always basically brings me back to where I started. And the one thing that you might lose, obviously, it's going to be time. So I'll give you an example of this for anybody listening, and maybe this will spark more conversation. But I remember the moment when I began investing in real estate, and we we had a paid off house and everything. We were like in the place that everybody wanted to be. We had quite a bit of monies stashed, put away, and from the sale of the business and all this. And it was not 24 hours later when I said, "We're going to invest in real estate, and here's what we're going to go do." And my wife said, "What do you mean? Like, what does that all mean? Like, what's going to happen?" I said, "I don't know. Like, I just here's what I've learned, and this is what's going to happen, or this is what I want to happen." And I said, "I don't know really what it's going to happen, but we're supposed to do this, and we're supposed to build wealth. So I'm going to take all this money, instead of putting it away and saving it, or going to Hawaii for 10 years using this money, I'm going to use it to invest in our wealth for the future." And then I looked then she looked at me and said, "Whatever you do, just don't lose our house." That was the words. That was the words. And that was also the motivation to do everything that I do, right? Is like, or when I was investing, is like, whatever you do, don't lose our house. So I said, okay, the worst that's going to happen is that the market begins to crash and all these things, and I'll sell all the stuff that we bought, and I'll pay back our lines of credit, and we'll just be in the same position as we are right now. Like, we might lose some money, but we won't lose our house. And that's the greatest thing. I won't get into why real estate is a great investment in terms of knowing when things are going bad, because it doesn't happen like overnight. It's not, you can't go bankrupt overnight with real estate, basically, right? Like, you can, if you're watching the thing, you can see the thing happening. And if you're not a goofball, like I usually am, you could be like, I think we better start to sell, and just take the bite, right? So that's what I said. And so it was, again, looking at what's the worst that's going to happen. And the only thing that we would lose is time, and maybe some little bit of money, but we wouldn't lose our house. So that was the end result of, if I do this, am I willing to lose my house? No. Does that make sense? So there's that point where, okay, I'm going to step into this, but if it gets to this piece here, I'm out. This is telling me that I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to risk that piece of it. I don't know if that made any sense.
Oh, I, I think absolutely. I mean, it was your fear, and your wife expressed her fear.
Well, I
Like,
really, the
you
funny thing,
you
Lorna,
know,
though, sorry to cut you off, is like, I wasn't afraid. Like, I truly was not afraid. Maybe she was, but I was like, whatever, I'm good. And I think, and here's the other thing about this, and I don't let everybody else talk here, because this is an important thing. And again, this is not advice. This is Joey's brain. Don't take this as advice, or do what I do. Because I am not attached or ignorant to a lot of the things, like in this case, it was real estate. I'm ignorant to the whole economy and financial. I'm just so ignorant to it. I'm like, I don't know. But everybody else was like, there are all these analysts and all these other things, which made them more fearful, because they had more data points to be fearful about. Does that make sense? For me, I was like, what's the worst that can happen? Well, the interest rate can go up. Okay, so if the interest rate goes up, so why don't I figure, instead of it being 2% and this will work, why don't I figure it out on 6%? and if it's at 6%, it'll still work. So that works, right? So I put in parameters of fear that I would adjust with, but then all the other data points that people were throwing at me and all these other kind of things, I'm going, holy crap! Like you're never going to make a decision based on all of these data points because you can absolutely feed the fear. That's another one. I'll stop now.
Feed the fear.
I'll stop.
Yes, you can feed. I think I've been known to feed fears, but hearing this, Joey, what came to mind is I wonder, and maybe the people who are watching, whether you're live or on the replay, would put in the comments on what how they deal with some of the fear, or uh, because I wonder if there's some personality type things that happen,
Mm,
if or
okay.
whether it's your experience with, you grew up in an entrepreneurial household,
Yeah.
so your whole experience and your whole thought processes on how to think through some of those things would be different than somebody who's new to
Right.
entrepreneurship, or even I think from the change of, maybe they've owned their own business, but looking for, the people you work with are going into group coaching, and if this is the first, like, moving into group coaching, it's a different mindset.
Right.
So is there a personality thing? Is there a learned thing? um, so I'm just curious how other people see it, whether there's some people here listening who are like you and just say, what's the worst that can happen? I think I've been in both places. Like, there's been times where it's like I've been driven and not really worried about the fear. And yet sometimes maybe there was some things I should have been fearful of. Um,
What do
and
you gravitate toward? Are you more of the let's just see what happens, or on the other side? Which one do you say you would be more susceptible to?
I think naturally I would just go for it.
Okay, cool.
And I've had, whatever. I'm not going to get into what it could be or couldn't be, but just in the last couple of years, where there's likely more fear, um, with something. So that's something I've been working on, and like, just in my own personal and professional growth, in working on getting through some of those pieces of fear. But there's really, if I get my mind set on something, there's not a lot that's going to hold me back.
Cool, cool, cool. Let me come back to you in a second because I want to. Do you want to read this? If you can see that.
Yeah. From Kay, fears are often around feeling a threat to survival. So I love how Lorna's suggestion for moving into one's own business in stages. I also imagine the worst case scenario, like Joey, then do a breath work to reset my vagus nerve so that my physical body stops reacting like I am being threatened. This begins to diminish the intensity of fear so I can move forward. I love that.
Very, very cool. I'd like to know from you, Kay, if you're willing to put in the chat what you are naturally, what your first response is. Are you the go for it person? Number one, let's say that, and anybody else listening want to play along, or number two, the other side, which I don't know what the opposite would be, which is not that you're going for it, you're more analyzing the fear and all these other kind of things. And there's no right or wrong answer because Lorna, you hit it on the nail on the head. Was that I did grow up in that environment where I saw my dad just do things, and I don't know if it's learned or I just have always felt the fact of I don't really worry about it. And maybe because it was the environment, I don't know, but I've never really felt the fear of just not going for it. I just did everything. I was always a rebel, always going just I'm gonna go do this and whatever. So maybe it is a personality thing. Maybe it is an entrepreneurial personality thing. I don't know. So I'd like to hear from everybody here. If you're live, by the way, let us know live #live or #replay if you're watching the replay. And I just want to give If you're in the if you're heart centered, by the way, just let me give you a plug for the Facebook group. You can join us in the Facebook group because this is where Lorna and I and a whole bunch of amazing humans are every day, talking about amazing things. So join us there.
Yeah, I have to say I did my first, like, a I would call it intensive breath work session. Like, it was 45 minutes long, a couple of weeks ago. It was, yeah, amazing, amazing. Breathing is good for you. Did you know that?
I thought so. Yeah, like I I know it is. It's kind of cool.
That would be also one way to push through the fear. I'm just really curious for, like, with anyone who's watching, about where, what fear is holding them back now.
Hmm.
Um, I'd be interested in that. Uh,
I also want to share with from the book Fear, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. There's five. I mean, there's a whole bunch of notes here I have in front of me, but there's like
yeah,
five fear truths, and I'll share them with you, and maybe we can bounce off of those or anybody else listening to talk about them and see what you think. The truth number one about fear is this: that the fear will never go away as long as I continue to grow. Fear will never go away as long as I continue to grow. And I want you to think about what that statement is. Think about what she's saying. Because we just talked a little bit about being comfortable with the fear that we're not growing. We're just staying
hmm
in the thing that we're just comfortable with. But this brings a whole other conversation to the table.
but that there's always fear.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the fact that you're not growing. So I still believe what we said, that I don't take that off the table, where it's like you're comfortable with this fear and you're just living with it. Whether you know it or not, you're there. But the more, if you realize now that you're sitting in a fear, that you're not growing, that'll bring on more fear, right? I think,
yeah.
which hopefully motivates you to go.
Well, and that brings it back to choose your fear, because
Yes.
it it's one fear or the other. And I don't know, this is no scientific background thing or not at all. And but I'm sure people maybe have heard it. It's about living that life with no regrets. So I think that's a question to ask. If I'm going to feel fear anyway,
Yeah.
what do I want, and what do I want to feel afterwards? Like, if I stay here, what is that going to feel like in 10 years? If I try and I commit to something, and I'm not talking just entrepreneurship, that's anything.
You're right. You're right.
It could be health changes, it could be a new career, like moving. I moved. I think we moved 4 times or something in 10 years, when my husband was advancing in his career, and there was always fear around that, because there's so much uncertainty. And even thinking about uncertainty is, when uh, one of the first calls that I had, with Rich Jeffrin, and I'm sure I've heard this before, but I'll give him credit, because that's where it first impacted me, is that there is no certainty.
Mm-hmm.
There is no certainty in anything.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, you're going to be in uncertainty, whichever fear it is that you're in. So I totally agree with that truth. Like, there's fear, whatever it is.
Well, you also brought up, like, aside from entrepreneurship, because like you're sparking some things here. I'll come right back to you, Kate. Not that I'm ignoring you here. Uh, Outside of entrepreneurship, this is where, like, I've never really thought this deep about this before, about being comfortable with fear. And I'm glad we're having this conversation, because on the other side of everything else, outside of entrepreneurship and business, I am comfortable with a lot of fears. I'll give you an example: fear of heights, whatever. Uh, what's on the other side of that? That I could, I don't know, go on Ferris wheels and, like, whatever, and not be terrified and that kind of stuff, and get off the ride and say that was epic and have an enjoyable experience. perhaps, but I'm more comfortable with living in the fear of like I don't want to feel that fear. So I'll sit here and be okay with the fear that I'm missing out on an epic experience after the ride thingy. Does that make sense? So I'm okay with that. Same as like
Yeah.
jumping out of a plane. It's like, okay, well, that'd be great, but I'm comfortable sitting here in my fear of like,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I think
So
that,
on a lot of those things, I'm way more comfortable with the fear that I'm already living in. And a lot of people
well,
would say like you're crazy that you're not living life. You have to get out of that. So this is where, as I'm thinking about it, I'm only trying to identify now with somebody who's not an entrepreneur. If I take myself out of the entrepreneur role and put myself into there, into how I live my life in fear of these other things, like now I can identify or connect more with somebody who's not an entrepreneur trying to build a business.
yeah. Well, and sometimes they could overlap. You could end up at some kind of conference or um, some kind of convention that's on the 130th floor or something that's got nice big plate glass windows looking down and you can't get away from it.
Well, yeah, we won't get into like
You
the
know?
acrophobia
So,
that I have. Like it's a different thing. It's a weird kind of acrophobia.
yeah.
If you want to, like when I'm sitting in a plane, I'm sitting in the window seat. Like it's not like that.
Yeah.
It's on.
Yeah. I'm
It's
just
a kind of
I'm
different thing. But
teasing you.
yeah, yeah,
I'm teasing you. And phobias are a different kind of fear.
yeah,
Um, and I think that we can it still comes down to choice. Like you
yeah.
can still choose that fear or not. The thing is, how much does it impact your life, and does it matter to you? Like if it doesn't matter to you that you never go on a Ferris wheel or a roller coaster or
See, roller coasters I love. Right. So that's, but a Ferris wheel, no. You put me on a Ferris, no, I won't go on a Ferris wheel, but I'll go on a roller coaster. Like I'm the first one there.
okay, even the
Like
ones that go
it's
loop to loop and turn you
yeah,
upside down.
all the time. I'm there. I'm like, this is amazing. This is epic. I love that thrill. Let me explain it. Like in 2 seconds, I'll explain how my fear of heights is, and it'll make hopefully it makes sense. It's basically a fear of that if wherever I am, the best analogy is like kind of on a bridge or something. Like if I'm crossing over, there's one bridge here in Toronto. Like when you cross over downtown Toronto over to the other side over the QEW, there's that bridge that goes from like the CNE type of thing over to Ontario Place, whatever. Anyway, so it's this bridge that terrifies the hell out of me. And it's not heights. It terrifies the hell out of me because it's so creaky and it's like this can break and I could die.
Mhm.
That's the thing. So if another example is going to a slide, like a what do you call it, water slide. We're into this water slide over Niagara Falls, huge, like huge thing, right? And I love it. I love the thrill, but because we had to climb up all those stairs, no problem on climbing up the stairs. But then when we got at the top, there was like I don't know 50 people waiting to get to the top, and I'm standing on the stairs, and the stairs are kind of, and I'm freaking out, having a panic attack because I think that the stairs are going to crumble and fall, and it's high. That's the kind of
Okay.
fear that I had, like the CN Tower. Like in Toronto, I can go to the CN Tower. I can go on the glass thing and look down and go, "Wow, this is amazing!" Like, doesn't freak me out because I feel enclosed and safe. That this is amazing. And
Mhm.
same as a plane. Like, okay, I'm safe. Like I look down or whatever. But it's when it's an open space, like a Ferris wheel or something like that. It's like, and I'm way up at the top, and like, what happens if this? Anyway, I said 2 minutes, and that was a little bit more than two
I
minutes.
think
But that's
I think I've had those moments on the Ferris wheel, especially when it's swinging like crazy and you're
yeah. It's
like just
no.
get me. It's just deep breathe.
Yeah,
I
like a
mean,
roller coaster's too fast. Like I'm creeping up, and you're like, "Holy crap!" Boom, and you're down. Like, wow. And a loop to loop, it's like it's over. It's so fast. I don't get the fear.
yeah,
So
yeah.
anyway, there's a little insight to Crazy Joey's brain.
Okay, so what's the second truth?
Oh no, actually no. Let's go back to Kate because she
Oh, okay,
put in here,
yeah.
right here. Kay says she initially pulls back when fear shows up and go inward and observe. Cool. I don't worry about the feeling showing up. I accept it as natural and as something that doesn't have to paralyze me. That is so cool. And yes, we don't have to pathologize, or is that apologize?
Yeah.
Pa-
Pathologize.
pathologize? That's a new word for me. I don't know what that means.
Um,
Pathologize fear.
I don't know how to explain it. Like pathology, I mean, in my world, we were always waiting for the pathology results from the cancerous
Mm.
tumors.
Okay, so like it's an analysis of some kind, like
Yeah,
you're analyzing fear.
yes,
Okay,
and making it.
pathologize fear. I've never heard it that way, so that's cool.
Kay can likely better explain what she means than I can.
Yeah, she's showing off. Okay, I love you.
Oh,
When
make
we
fear
accept
a
it
bad thing.
as sorry.
She said make fear a bad thing.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
nice. So when we
yeah.
accept it as natural part of growth, how we respond to it changes. Yes, and I like that, Clay. Okay, I like you said that because that's what it is. Like, um, fear will never go away. You can never get away from fear. It's always going to be there, and it's how you accept it, how you handle it, and that's what I mean by choosing the fear that you're going to be in. Whether choosing the fear that you're in today, that you're comfortable with, or choosing something where you don't know how it's going to end up. And that's the harder one. Obviously, it's always the harder one. Truth number two is the only way to get rid of fear of doing something is to go out and do it. Period. That's the truth.
Uh, that's the truth. I would now let me see if I wanted to be on the other side of the fence. What would I say?
Mm-hmm.
I guess if I used my, I'm afraid to do whatever it is, and I imagine, if I use that statement and I scare myself by imagining, could I actually get over that fear without doing it? I think the
Well,
best way is to do it. Like I don't know if that thought process would be enough to just be done with it.
this is where going back to my story of, or like example of, whatever it is, going on a Ferris wheel. It's like what Carol is saying in her book is the fact that when she confronted the fear, um, the situations or the particular situation dissolved. And that's usually what I've found
Hmm.
because and not the not the Ferris wheel thingy, but this like business or doing something fearful of the unknown is we imagine the worst case scenario, even if we're not doing the other exercise. Like, what's the worst that can happen? But we still do it. We're imagining this thing that's going to happen that normally does not happen.
Yeah.
And so that's what she's meaning is that you actually do it and you step into it and then you're like, hey, this wasn't so bad. And so, yeah, I could look at the same thing and go, well, if I go on that Ferris wheel, I could, maybe that wasn't so bad. Right. But I'm just not comfortable
Just not
in
gonna.
that case.
Well, but and I think that I still go back to that. Like the Ferris wheel's your choice. Like does it impact your
Well, but
life?
everything is, but
No.
that's the thing. I think that is the deciding factor. Just like Alex Sharfin, remember he was giving us the whole
Yeah.
the entrepreneurial traits and like here's the deciding question. I think that's the
Yeah.
deciding question that you just came up with, which is yes, you can choose the fear and you're comfortable with this, but does it impact your life? And I would argue that if you are financially broke or exhausted or all these other things in your financially in your financial world or your well-being mentally and all these things, that's impacting your life because the fact of the fear of like, well, I'm not going to quit my job or I'm going to continue to get abuse from my boss, or I'm going to drive to a place that I hate every single day. Like that's impacting your life. Would you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's a measuring stick. And when I say impact, like it might not it might not even impact your actual current life. If you want, um, going back to I'm either in a business or, and whether you're in a business or just or you're in a different have a career, or you're leaving a job, you're adding a new program. Like maybe it's just even adding a new program to your services, but it's something new. Is so it might not impact like you're going broke, or you can't pay the bills, or uh, they're but the fears are might be different. Like, what if nobody shows up? What if nobody likes this? What if so those fears may still be there, where it might not have necessarily a negative impact on your life right now, but it potentially does have a negative impact because regret could come. You might delay it for 3, 4, or 5 years, and then have it be super successful. And that's, there, and then wonder, like, what would have happened if I really had done that 4 years ago instead of last year.
Okay, so
So
on the other side, because I have another example of this, but also going to Carol's book here, the example she says is there's all this when then type of scenarios, right?
yeah,
When I feel better
yeah,
then, or when this gets worse then. Okay, and so just keep that in mind. But then to my another example of this is um making living in the fear. I'll give you an example. This is an example. When I was selling my family company, I had so much pain going there and dealing with it every single day, right? And so the fear was, what am I giving up, and where am I going to get money? How's this going to, like, all that stuff? What am I going to do with my life? And all of that. Like, the security was no longer there. Like, that was kind of like the job thingy. Like, there was no more security. If I sell this thing, then what? I'll get a little bit of money, whatever. Then what, right? However, that's the fear. Like, okay, what am I going to do next? But what the deciding factor was the fear or the pain that I was living in right then and there. Like, every day coming home and yelling at my wife, being mad at my son who was like 2 or whatever for no good reason, like, or 4, whatever he was, right? Like, just coming home every day or getting up and being in those moods every day. And so I was living, you could say I was living in the fear of, like, what if I do this, and what am I going to do next? I have no idea of that fear, but it was more of the decision based on how my life was then, of the pain. And that brings us to a point where, Tony Robbins says this all the time, that pain is a bigger motivator than pleasure,
yeah,
right?
yeah. They say that in marketing too.
Yeah. But that's
It's a universal piece of it. I think in just for us in general, like that, we want to avoid pain, but I think there's a fear of whether could the pain be worse. I don't know that that's a conscious thought. If you're sitting, if you're wanting to make the move, and I'm thinking about people wanting to make the move into entrepreneurship or into a, whether it's new or whether it's growing or whether they've tried something and it hasn't worked out and they want to try again, um, is like that fear still shows up, um, and that pain may be there, but the pain, I think what shows up for them is a different, it is exactly what you were saying. I'm yelling at my wife. I'm not happy, with my kids, and I'm unhappy when I get home. It's not like, so there's pain there, but I don't know that many people, and I could be wrong. I've been wrong once, but that was just a mistake. I'm just kidding.
It was the first time for everything.
um, so maybe it isn't many people, but I think for some, they don't recognize that those things are fear, that's
No,
fear
I
that's
agree.
driving that pain.
I agree. I agree. Like, I don't think that it's only in these kind of afterthoughts, these conversations of connecting the dots after the fact, that you can look back and go, yeah, that was actually fear. But you know, and maybe that's the way that I approached it, or trying to teach other people about fear back then was like, well, I don't have fear. I'm just going to step into the unknown because I don't want to be where I am today. But it was always about the situation I'm in now, which is like, what's the worst situation that can happen? So if I take that as an example again, well, I'm really having a crappy day every single day, and I don't want to get up, and I'm in this mood and all these things. What's the worst that's going to happen? I'll, you know, I'll just go back to the same way it was today now. Whereas there's an opportunity here that I have no idea if this business is going to work, or if I quit and I start this other thing, that I'm going to make as much money as I am now, but maybe I'll be a little bit happier. Maybe I won't have to deal with this anymore. So I don't know. And that's what I'm going to go and try. Now, the other side of this, because I'm contradicting myself, but just to bring it up into the conversation, would be back to business again. So if you've done a business and it failed, and then you're like, well, what if I start another business and it fails? Because you've already felt the pain, And that's a tough one because I've dealt with that a lot too, like with clients. It's like, well,
Yeah.
I've already done this and that failed, and now I'm trying to do it again, but what if that fails again? So that's a big block. Do you have anything to say about that one or interject that one?
Oh, it's, yeah. I wish I could say I had no personal experience with that block.
We've all had it.
You know, I think that like every every step we take, like that pain does get to us. Like it compounds over each piece. Like at least, and I'm going to say this in the context of not having a good community around you, not having people who can help through some of these things and work through some of the mindset thing that's come up, because I think it's
Huge.
normal. You know, the more times we're hurt, the bigger the hurt ends up to it's bigger and we feel it sooner, and that instills more fear. We're not as willing to take the risks. And again, one of the things that I my summer of actually it's been like 9 months of like total mind-blowing change at times. Hearing that really in life most things don't turn out.
Hmm.
um, so knowing that is a possibility could increase the fear. What it did was give me freedom to think, well, like something's going to work out. And part of me went, I've already had a lot of things that didn't work out, so I'm due to have something work out. Like the odds are getting in my favor here,
Yeah, for
you
sure.
know,
Yeah.
in that way. Um, so I get that increasing fear that I think leads to paralysis. Like Kay mentioned, that some of the practices she does helps her not be paralyzed by the fear, and I think that's a big one. Is there's paralysis, and then that shows up in procrastination. It shows up in having to take course after course after course after course after course because you think you don't know enough, you haven't learned enough.
Yeah.
There's a lot of self-limiting thoughts that come up with each one, and when you can find out that a lot of that experience is normal and it happens to lots of people, and you still want to be a critical thinker
Hmm.
or have people who can help you critically think through some of those scenarios, because I don't want anyone to think that just because we say you're fearful of it, just go for it, whatever it is, because I don't know what it really is that you're
Sure.
doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And there may be some critical thinking involved that can help make that decision or help tweak the decision. But giving up, and it's not easy, it wasn't easy for me, giving up that perfection, which is another way that fear hides, is imperfection, is
Very true.
um, to know that I can start out on this path and it likely isn't going to be perfect, and it may not even end up exactly how I'm thinking it's going to turn out, but it could turn out a whole lot better. So I'm going to deal with that fear at every step of the way. Yeah,
And
I'll bounce it back to you.
you're kind of leading into truth number 4, which is not only am I going to experience fear whenever I'm on an unfamiliar territory, but so is everyone else. I'll read it
Oh,
again. Not only that am I going to feel or experience fear whenever I'm on unfamiliar territory, but so is everyone else.
yeah, just sitting with that for a minute. What now? I don't know. Maybe it's just because it's the end of the day, kind of getting there. Because the first thing that popped into my mind about like where else does sometimes do I feel fear, and then thinking about it where other people are feel fear is when I go to band rehearsal, especially at the beginning of the year, or after we've had our first concert or whatever, when there's new music. Like I don't, not like I'm afraid of the music. I can't say that I really have a lot of fear of it, but I think there is, like, sometimes you just look and there's a whole lot of black on some of those pages. And it's like, how am I going to play? My fingers can't go that fast. And yet they will. But I never thought about how, that I'm sitting there feeling that way and that other people are. So that's just an everyday. occurrence. Now, it doesn't stop me from going to band, but I sure have a lot of fear when he says, okay, flutes, let's hear you. Oh, second flutes, let's hear you. Like, that brings up some fear for me. I've
Definitely.
never thought, I never thought the one sitting on either side felt that way.
Yep. 100%. Like it, and that's the thing is, what can you not, if you realize that it's a truth, and let's say that you're in a mastermind or something like that where people are more successful than you, doing more money or whatever it is, and then you realize the truth of, I'm terrified to do whatever it is that I want to go do, but so is Joey, so is Lorna, and she's doing amazing. So how can I learn from her? What can I pick up
Yeah.
from her? Right. So it helps ground you to say everybody's afraid. It's
Yeah.
impossible not to be afraid. It's just how you deal with it. That's why the whole topic today is choose your fear. Right.
Here.
Number five, just to finish it off, just to close the loop, would be is actually truth number five. Pushing through fear is less frightening than living with the underlying fear that comes from a feeling of helplessness. I'll read it again. Pushing through the fear is less frightening than living with the underlying fear that comes from a feeling of helplessness. And
Ooh.
yeah, it's big, right? And I think we've touched upon that in our own little way of being comfortable with the fear that we're living in. So if we add helplessness to that, now it's a whole other level. But I also want to, before you interject here, I want to add something here that I highlighted in the note, which is on some deep level, there is nothing to fear. This is where my mind is, okay? On some deep level, there's nothing to fear. It's the surface level that needs convincing. How many times have you heard me use those two words together, Lorna? Surface level, right? I use them
Mm.
all the time.
Yeah.
It's a surface level problem that your market is dealing with or that other people are talking about. Surface level. And so realistically, I'm in tune with a lot of the deeper levels that there is no fear. All I'm dealing with is the surface level brain thinking that my doubting Dan dude is telling me about. Anyway, go. There was a lot there.
Well, you have a, phenomenal relationship with fear, and inspirational, because it you will just go do it. Like, you are a quick implementer. Um, and I think some of that goes to entrepreneurship, which, then I guess, if, for everyone listening, if there's anything to learn, is that this is the best way to learn how to get over fear.
Yeah,
is, is being an entrepreneur. It's the
just
best
going.
self-development program
Yeah,
ever. Um, but yeah, it actually made me feel a little sad thinking about people feeling so helpless.
yeah,
Um, and I've been there. Like, I I know what it was like for me. Um, and I think that's the reward for getting through fear. And again, for some people, some people can be like you, Joey, and they can go through and they can just say, okay, this is good. I'm going to do this. And maybe it's just this week, I'm going to face this fear doing this one thing. Like, I know that this is one way that I can make a step, and they take those steps and they get through it. Um, I, I think when it comes to getting to a point where you feel helpless, that it's important to have people around you who support your growth, who, um I mean, and this could be, maybe it's kind of could turn into a whole other call, that not to be comfortable with a group of people who are telling you the same things that your mind is chatting at you, that keep you stuck. You want people who can help you see and support you through those steps of facing that fear and doing it anyway. um yeah, I've got a t-shirt that says everything you want is on the other side of fear.
exactly.
So, I mean, if I guess, if you can imagine, like, in my head, I come up with a wall, like, and it's just not in a bad way, but it's just like, dang it, if I want that, it's on the other side of the wall. I've got to get through the wall. I don't know how I'm getting through the wall, or I got to get under it, or I got to get over it, or I got to get around it. But I'm not going to do it doing it here.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had to have people in my world tell me that I can do that at times. It
Mm-hmm.
hasn't always been a natural, um, that I've been able to just dig down deep and do it. I've had to have people who even question, like, what do you really want? Like, is that what you really want? Because if it is, this is it's going to take getting through that fear to do it. Uh, but you don't have to do it all today. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you can break it down. And for some people, if that fear is huge, like if there's a step that feels really huge, then it's, I mean, part of it's reducing the risk, but even just taking some of the smaller steps towards it, and breaking it down to be able to feel that, um, to be able to feel and get that confidence back. I can do this step. I can make this step. Um, whether it's asking, asking for something. Because sometimes you have to ask a lot of people
Yeah.
before you get a yes. So if you start with asking one person today, or one person a day, one person a week, I mean, you've got to, I mean, depending on how much time you have, sometimes you have to do more. But that's knowing that there's a bold move to make that will help you get through it. You get such a high from doing it. And then you've proven to yourself that you can do it, and you can do it again. It doesn't mean the fear doesn't come up again,
Yeah.
but
And on the other
it's just
side of that,
practice sometimes.
yeah, and that's kind of where I was going with this, because on the other side of that, and again, like I've dealt with this so long, and when I first started coaching, as you may or may not know, but that was what I was known for, is like I would go and do speeches around stepping into fear.
Mhm.
And so I dealt with a lot of conversations around this. And one of the things that I saw as patterns coming up was, even if someone was motivated enough by the surround system or support system around them, and they did something and it didn't work out, and even if they followed all the advice we've been talking about right now, that, well, most things aren't going to work, right? And they're all okay with that, but then it doesn't work, and then, but here's the caveat to this, is they beat themselves up, because
Yeah.
they're like, see, I shouldn't have done that, right? And that's the challenging piece of this. Whereas I'm not going to say that I never beat myself up. Sometimes it does happen. I go, holy crap, why did I do that one, right? And that's when, going back to support systems and all that. Remember a couple of years ago, one of my coaches said, "It's okay to mope." I'll never forget those words, because I always thought, no, I got to stand up. I got to take it on the chin again, and I got to go get back up on the horse and all these things. But it was in one of those modes where I'm like, I'm an idiot. I should not have done that one, right? Because most of the times I'm like okay with it, like, well, that didn't work. Let's do something else, right? So it's having all of these things are like layers of dealing with it, because like you said, if it's not going to work out and then you beat yourself up, that's not a good thing either, because you can say, well, I did exactly what the book said. I went for it and it didn't work, and now I feel like really crappy, because they're in remorse or they're regret, like I shouldn't have done that. Or I
Yeah.
don't know where I was going with this, but there was a point to this. um, Here's the point. uh, like in the helplessness, I want to go back to the helplessness for a second.
Hmm.
I wouldn't have, until now, I wouldn't have identified the story I just told you about my family business and like giving it all up and all these other things. But I did feel helpless. Like I really did. There was no, there every, but I wouldn't have identified with that word. But it was like every day I just felt like, holy crap, like nobody's listening to me. Nope, nothing's changing. I'm feeling beat up every single day. I'm attacked, all these other things. And, and I didn't, like, I'm, to be careful of how I say this, because like Donna has been like the rock in my life, and so like she's the support system, right? So if it wasn't for her allowing me to make choices of stepping into fear of the unknown, then I don't know how much of it I really would have done. not to the fact that I wouldn't have done a lot of it or like some of it, but there's a lot there to go. And maybe it wasn't even a conscious thought. It was just the way we have the relationship. It's just that, but to your point of even if you don't have a spouse or whatever it is or a partnership like that, it's the support system, whatever that looks like to you,
Yeah.
which is what I really want to stress. Like that's the most important thing. And I'll never and I'm going off on a lot of these tangents, but it's important for everyone to listen that's listening to hear these because it was I think it was Geo who told a story about someone who was in who went to the mastermind to another mastermind like I think it was Genius Network or whatever it was, and then anyway this dude just lost everything, and he stood up and he told the story about how he lost everything, house burnt down, like everything majorly, and had nothing left, and I forget who it was, whoever it was, I think it was whoever was on stage, maybe Joe Polish or whatever it was, and he said, he goes, "Congratulations, that's amazing." And the guy looks at him and says, are you crazy? Are you like on drugs? Like I just told you, I lost everything. My house burnt down, like all this stuff. And and again, I'm paraphrasing this because I can't remember the story exactly, but it was basically now you can now you can grow from that fear, from that level of destruction and all that stuff. Like you can grow from that level. You already know the pain. You can grow from that pain. It was a totally different reframe of what's happened,
Yeah.
right? And so that's kind of that's a lot of my life is lived there. It's like in the pain of that, like and again the motivator. And that's I guess what they're coming to is like pain is the motivator to move you into the fear. Like so, what if I build another house and it burns down? Well, dude, you've already felt this, right? You're already here. You know, I don't know if that made
Yeah.
any sense, but
Well, I think, well, a couple of things. There was a couple of comments. Case had to leave, but I know there was a comment there that's interesting.
you still here?
Um, but yeah, just I don't know that we have to get over fear, but instead focusing on shifting what's under the fear, the helplessness or low self-esteem or self-sabotage or doubt. And I think she's right. I've never thought about this before, but I think it's actually a fear sandwich.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think we don't identify the fear to start with. That's the
Mm-hmm.
procrastinating, the perfectionism, the avoidance, the like that's kind of one side of it, and there's the fear, and then there's what is underlying the fear,
Yeah.
like what it is. And the thing is that it's not a negative thing to think that there's self-doubt or there's
Right.
what else did she say, like the helplessness. What that is to then identify what you need and where do you go for help, and being
Yeah.
willing to ask for help, which can be another fear, but that's, there's ways to get over that. But it's that support system, which can be anything. And I mean, and it's different. That when you mentioned, I'm going to be on a little bit of a rant because I'm in my mind's going in a few different directions. But like when you mentioned, having Donna there and being supportive and having that, I likely had less. I know I had less fear when Callum was alive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Being responsible for me brings in more fear, especially as
Mm-hmm.
I've had some of those moments that haven't worked out. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't, and some of it's the emotional piece.
Mm-hmm.
Although I don't know that he might not have been as emotionally supportive as Donna is for you, but he was a reality guy. So I mean, he at least would keep me in reality, instead of where I kind of go off in different places. So there might be something to that, and that I'm sure changes for other people depending on what their responsibilities are and in their own life, in their personal life. But it's an interesting thought about where that might shift. But like whether it's friends or family, I lean on my online entrepreneur friends, to provide that support for me,
Right.
because that's that's what I need. I don't have other people in my life. Most of the other people in my life just kind of go, "Can't you just get a job?" Like,
Exactly. Exactly.
so that's not who's going to support me through the fears. um so I think with with that piece, that part of it anyway. I mean, there's so it seems like such a simple thing to talk about fear, and yet I think if I've taken anything away from this is that there's lots of, I wouldn't say complications, but there's lots of dynamics to it. And it really depends on the individual and the situation with, what strategy you might use to get through it. Um, I think I would want to leave people with not not being afraid of fear. Like just to know that that's a normal part of what you're going to go through. And if you're here watching Heart Centered Marketing, chances are you're into entrepreneurship or want to be, and that fear is going to be with you. You mentioned that earlier. There's always going to be a fear. So which one are you going to choose? And and just have people that can help you make that choice if you can't make that choice or you're not ready to make that choice.
I agree.
Um, but don't let it hold you back. Don't let it hold you back.
I agree. What a great way to finish off tonight's show. Thank you, Lorna. Yeah, we can
You're
go
very
on
welcome.
forever about this because you're right. There are different levels of how do you connect stepping into fear and all these other things. And there is not just this one blanket statement. Even though I love the fact of like just feel the fear and do it anyway. Like that's
Yeah.
the title of the book, which is right. Like just feel the fear and do it anyway. But all the things that we brought up today are super important too, because you might just do that one time, feel the fear, do it anyway, and then you do it and you beat yourself up, and now you're stuck in a whole other different zone. So
Yeah.
yeah, you have to analyze who you are, what it's all about, what is the fear for you, all those things you just said. I can't say it better, so I don't want to try and repeat it. Um, so
Thank
thank
you.
you, thank you for everyone for being here. If you're here on the live, let us know by hashtag live or hashtag replay if you're watching the replay. And please join us in the group. I'm just going to put this in here one more time, just in case you are one of those heart centered, amazing humans that want to join us in the Heart Centered Marketing Club. That's a private Facebook group where there's a bunch of amazing humans in there talking about just general stuff, marketing, business, celebrating each other. That's what we're all about there. So join us in there if you are one of those people. Thank you very much. We'll see you
Super. Thank
next.
you.
Yeah, we will see you next Tuesday for another heart centered marketing show. Take care, everyone.
Bye.